Welcome to Cross Currents with Scott Widmeyer, your local source for insightful commentary on a wide range of topics that impact the lives of Nantucketers. Now, here's your host, Scott Widmeyer.
Good day. This is Scott Widmeyer, your host for Cross Currents on WNCK, Nantucket's NPR station. On today's show, we are focused on the upcoming annual town meeting for Nantucket, which will take place Tuesday, April 3rd, beginning at 6 p.m. at Nantucket High School. In our first segment today, we're joined by Nantucket Town Manager Libby Gibson. Libby, welcome to Cross Currents.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Libby, for a brief history lesson for our listeners, I just want to remind people that the town meeting form of government originated in New England in the 17th century. Some refer to town meetings as kind of the best of direct democratic rulemaking. How would you describe town meetings?
Well, that is probably a good way to describe it. Some people get a little frustrated with that, but I think you certainly can say your piece at town meeting. You can bring up just about anything via a citizen warrant article. You can get a warrant article in with the signatures of 10 registered voters, and we've had a very wide range of citizen-sponsored articles in the past. But I think once we get to town meeting, people get down to business, and, you know, like I said, they say their piece. We get at the articles, and it is arguably the most important thing that happens in town government during the year.
I mean, it's really interesting when you think about it. Town meetings really have provided people a soapbox to really speak from. And, you know, today our soapbox tends to be social media, sending messages on Twitter, on Facebook. But when you think about it, the real tried and true way, the old-fashioned way, still works with town meetings. It's really interesting to watch this play out in communities across New England and particularly here on Nantucket. Libby, you've been in your position as town manager for more than 20 years. You've been to your share of town meetings. Can you give us, are there some fond memories and some really, horrible memories you have from town meetings of the past that you can't forget?
Oh, yes.
Tell us some of those.
Well, there's probably a number of things that are sort of horrific, but nothing I'd really want to talk about.
Okay, that's all right. That's okay.
But
that's okay.
There are what tends to happen sometimes at town meeting is the thing that I notice early on. You kind of get a feel for how the meeting is going, and it can shift quickly, and you sort of can tell what the mood of the crowd is sort of early on. And are they in a good mood? Are they in a bad mood? Are they, not terribly engaged? You can tell that. And like I said, it can shift. And sometimes I like it, obviously, when people are kind of in a, every now and then, even if they're not, somebody might say something kind of funny, and everybody will laugh and sort of get back to the good mood.
Right.
And some of the more memorable things, well, a number of years ago, we had someone who spoke at length for a little while, sort of rambling on, and then he asked his fiancée to marry him, and that was
wow.
one of the funniest home videos is where that ended up.
I love it.
That was interesting. We've had some people submit some very interesting warrant articles. One person wanted to actually have people vote him in as the, and I quote, village idiot. That was interesting. I don't think we spent a lot of time on that article.
Right.
But like I said, people can submit really almost anything you want, and possibly a frustration is town meeting is, it's a serious thing. It is. This is where the
really
laws
is.
of the town are made. This is where the budget is voted on. These are where the capital projects. This is where the voters are determining what we're going to spend our money on. And we, in my opinion, we ought not to be spending a lot of time on things that aren't legal, that don't really have much bearing on whether or not we're ever going to do them. It's just when people want to bring some sort of an issue to attention. I sort of feel like figure out another way to do that and don't bog down town meeting with that sort of thing. But it does tend to happen from time to time. There's a bit of an etiquette with town meeting, and I always get kind of discouraged and disappointed when people either cheer for something that did or didn't happen, or occasionally there you might hear a boo or a sit down. kind of thing. That does not encourage people to be a part of town meeting. People ought to be respectful of one another when they're speaking. And, sometimes things are confusing to people who aren't involved in town government on a daily basis. And while we all might think, how come that person doesn't know this? It's incumbent upon us to explain it properly at the beginning. And that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, because a lot of times people don't pay attention to anything until they realize it's going to affect them personally.
Is there a certain amount of time set aside for each warrant, or is it really up to the moderator to kind of see how things are moving?
It's generally up to the moderator to see how things are moving. However, sponsors and other speakers are given certain periods of time to talk. And there's a timer that everybody can see up on the screen at the head of the auditorium. And it's not infrequent that people go beyond the timer, and the moderator is very good at politely reminding them to try to stick to the time limit. We do an interesting thing at our town meeting that I haven't heard is done as a regular thing at other town meetings, but at this town meeting we have 90 articles on the warrant. And that's actually on the low side of things. So at the very beginning of our town meeting, we do what's a call of the articles. So the moderator goes through every single article and calls it Article 1, Article 2, and so on. And if you wish to speak on it, you say, call Article 1. And the moderator takes your name down. She jots down everybody who called an article and what the articles were, and then we go through it again. And those are the articles we're going to talk about, and we then vote on the remaining articles right then and there to get them out of the way. And that really, I think, makes things efficient.
Yeah, it definitely would keep it organized.
The 90 articles, knock on wood, we will, in all likelihood, get through in less than 3 nights, like 2 or maybe even 1. I don't want to press my luck.
Oh, so this will go multiple nights?
It may. We've had town meetings with in excess of 100 articles that have gone one night. It all depends. We also have sort of been going back and forth between a Saturday town meeting and a weeknight, and it really kind of depends on where the religious holidays fall. And this year it was too complicated to do town meeting on a Saturday because of that.
Of Easter, Passover. Let me just touch on a couple other items. There's one proposal by Nantucket resident Howard Dickler that would authorize the board to place a $30 million tax levy override on the ballot. This would supposedly generate new dollars for unfunded priorities that the town has. In effect, it would lower the tax rate for full-time homeowners, but increase rates for part-time homeowners. Is there a sentiment on that? Are you hearing things? Does it have a chance? What do you think?
I have not heard a lot about that article. The Finance Committee, though, discussed that article at length. And I think in the end, first of all, only the selectmen can place a question like that on the ballot. It can't be done by town meeting. And that's just one sort of technical issue. But I think that something like this it's a large amount of money to have sort of out there. And I think one of the serious concerns by the FinCom was that there's then something of a lack of control over really how that money would be spent in the first year and possibly even thereafter, although town meeting would obviously have a role. I think it hasn't been overly discussed publicly other than at FinCom and Board of Selectmen meetings, out in the community as to exactly how people's tax rates or bills would be affected. And if truly the year-round resident with the residential exemption, which you can get on only one property, is that really going to mean their tax rate would go down and or stay the same to raise that amount of money? And if that's going to require an adjustment to the residential exemption rate, and then what's the impact on the other tax bills? Does it drive people away? Does it anger them? Does it... what are the sort of unintended consequences of that? And I'm not sure that level of analysis has really been done. It sounds sort of good and interesting, but when you get it down into the details, I think there was too many open items that the FinCom and the board were grappling with that weren't addressed.
There's one more item, and then I'm going to let you go. The gender neutral, changing it from a board of selectmen to a board of, are we calling it a board of select persons?
I think select board might be.
Select board. And have other communities done this, or is Nantucket taking the lead on this?
I think there are other communities in Massachusetts that have done this. And the selectmen, as a matter of fact, on our agenda tomorrow night, on the Board of Selectmen's agenda, there is an item to consider a policy to change their name from Board of Selectmen to Select Board. The proposal in the warrant is a lot more comprehensive than that, and it would require changing documents and very extensive name changing, going back to change things. And I think there's a little bit of concern about the time that might take and who's going to do it and is it going to cost anything. Although the town of Brookline, for example, is a town that has done just that, and they are going through that process now. Although there are other towns who've taken the approach of more like, let's change our name, and going forward we're going to be known as the Select Board. I think that's the approach that the board feels is reasonable at this point, but it will certainly generate some discussion at town meeting, no question.
Well, Libby Gibson, you have the final word. We are really appreciative of your time today. Again, we encourage everyone on island to turn out for the town meeting, whether it's on April 3rd. It might go multiple nights, as Libby mentioned, but you'll have to stay tuned to that and be at the April 3rd meeting to see whether they wrap it up that night or not. But definitely get out to the town meeting and then get out again and vote the following week. Libby Gibson, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
On April 3rd, Nantucket will be the setting for New England democracy at its best when town residents gather at 6 p.m. at Nantucket High School to discuss, debate, and vote on some 90 articles that will impact traffic improvements, affordable housing, increasing the town's borrowing ability, and overall approval for a $95 million budget for the fiscal year ahead. Now, what I did not mention in my opener is a proposal by Nantucket resident Howard Dickler, which will come before the town meeting. Dickler's proposal would generate about $300 million in new property tax revenues for the town, about $30 million a year over the next 10 years. And here's the clincher. This additional revenue would not be charged against resident homeowners or businesses on the island. Instead, part-time, call them summer residential homeowners, would pay the tab. I bet you didn't know that Nantucket has one of the lowest property tax rates in Massachusetts, coming in at number 2 or number 3 lowest, $3.39 per assessed $1,000 value. And over the past 4 years, the property taxes on Nantucket have dropped 10%. In case you're wondering, Chilmark on the Vineyard has the lowest rates at 2.68 per assessed, but they've gone up 8% since 2014. The highest property tax rate in Massachusetts is about $24 per assessed 1,000 value, and that's in Long Meadow, Mass, in central Massachusetts. So what Howard is asking town meeting voters to do is to authorize the Board of Selectmen to place a $30 million tax levy override on the ballot to generate funds to meet town needs not being met by the current budget. Howard, this sometimes feels like a fairy tale of sorts. It's almost too good to be true. Give our listeners a common sense preview of how your proposal would work and how it would get funded.
Thank you very much. I'd be glad to. So as you mentioned, the goal of Article 35 is to increase island revenues without the islanders having to pay for it. The way it works is that the increase in the annual town budget by $30 million a year would be accomplished by a tax levy override. And the Board of Selectmen would have to place that on the ballot. The voters would have to vote for it. And then the Board of Selectmen would prevent the residents from having to pay for it by increasing the residential exemption from its current 25% to 35%, and also shifting the tax burden in such a way that both businesses and property owners who lived in their houses would not have to pay for this. One correction, when I wrote the article, I used the word authorized. It turns out the town meeting cannot authorize, so I'm amending the article at the town meeting to be a positive motion that just makes this recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Now, this opportunity was created only recently in 2016 when the Massachusetts legislature increased the maximum residential exemption from 20% to 35%. And that's the magic that makes this opportunity possible.
So, Howard, just explain to me, so if this was to be approved, if this recommendation was to be approved at the town meeting on April 3rd, would it go on the April 10th ballot, or would it be a ballot sometime later in the year?
It would be a ballot at another time. The deadline for getting something on the spring ballot passed in January. Okay.
So Howard, you've done a fantastic job kind of putting this information together, making it clear and understandable to folks. Give people a chance. Give them your website address so that they can go to that and kind of pull down all of the information that's at their fingertips. What is that address?
tinyurl.com/30millionoverride. And that's where the overview is posted.
Okay, great. So this goes to the town meeting on April 3rd. The vote will be taken whether to recommend it for a ballot initiative to go on the ballot probably later in the year. Howard, you've been working on this for a while. What prompted you to get out front on this proposal?
I'm really worried about the island. I think the sewer main break is a wake-up call for all of us, just how fragile our harbors and ponds and everything that makes Nantucket special is very fragile. And it takes money to fix the infrastructure so that we don't have sewer breaks. It takes money to do regular maintenance so there aren't breaks in the future because you catch the problems before they happen. It takes money to sewer parts of the island that are expanding with growth and putting too much nutrients in the ponds and the harbor. We really want to have that eelgrass and those scallops. We don't want Nantucket to have the reputation for having polluted waters. That would not serve any of us well. And that's just one of the many needs that the island has. We need a new our island home. We need to unclog our roads. We need coastal resilience. The flooding that we have regularly now with large storms is only going to get worse, and the town is going to need money. And I think a good place to start is getting money that the non-residents would pay for. In the future, we might have to dig into our own pockets, but this would be a good start.
And I think I would draw people's attention to, you can look at this on the town website, and also it's available on Howard's site as well. The 10-year capital project plan, it's a wish list. It's well over, it's $500 million. It's over $500 million, and it covers a number of the priorities that you just mentioned. We've got a lot of things that are broken on Nantucket. Our sewer system is broken. We've got improvements that need to be made at the airport. The capital project plan has a $28 million wish list for the airport. You mentioned the island home; it's in there at $38 million. If I did a quick total on the amount of money for roads, public works, and sewers, and it's just under $400 million. And this project plan, capital project plan, doesn't even factor in money that might be needed for disasters that come up, and we know they pop up every now and then with hurricanes, with tropical storms, with nor'easters. It doesn't cover funding for affordable housing, which is so badly needed, and we're making some progress on Nantucket with that, and as Howard mentioned, taking care of the coastline. Any other things that stick out that if you're a resident of Nantucket or you care about Nantucket, why this makes sense, why this would be a good investment, and it's not going to cost current residential owners and businesses very little to approve this.
That's correct. It will not cost the island residents. And I should say a word about a non-resident, because I have a lot of friends that are non-residents, and they're concerned about the island, and they don't get a vote to save the island. But many of them would vote to save the island, both because they love it and because it makes sense for their investment. If Nantucket goes south, their investment goes south.
And Howard, just elaborate a little bit on this, because the average tax bill for a non-resident property owner is currently a little more than $6,000 a year. Your proposal, if the override happened, would raise those taxes to $9,571, and we would still be regarded as a very low tax island for non-resident homeowners. Is that correct?
That is correct. Currently, we're the second lowest, as you mentioned, in the state. And if this was passed, our rate would go up to $5.19 for non-residents, and that would be the fifth lowest in the state. So it's still substantially below the average in the state, which is over $17 per $1,000 of assessed value.
If all of this happened in 2018, what mechanisms have to be in place? Do additional mechanisms have to be in place to ensure that this holds true for 2019, for 2020, for 2021? Because your plan talks about 10 years. How does all that get factored in? Are there additional things that have to happen annually? And what happens if we have a change in government?
Those are great questions. So this does not have to be done yearly. So a tax levy override is quite different than the usual debt exclusion overrides that the town does, which are only good for a single project. A tax levy override is different in that it becomes a part of the town's tax base. So every year thereafter, you not only get the amount of the override, $30 million, but you get the 2.5% that Proposition 2.5 allows increase every year. So the money will be there. It'll take a while for the island to ramp up to effectively spend that money. But there's no reason that the town can't invest that money and hold it till everything gets in line. Everybody decides what the best way to spend that money is and then spend it. The great thing is we'd be able to pay cash for projects. We wouldn't have to borrow the money.
Exactly, yeah. Follow-up question I wanted to ask you. Where are you getting support for this on the island, and where are you talking to people who are concerned about the fact that, a tax is a tax and they're fearful of it because there's this, big anti-tax mood in the country? So where are your pockets of support and where are your pockets of opposition as we, head into the town meeting?
I'd like to think there's more support out there than I know about, but everybody that I talk to and explain this to thinks it's a good idea. I think this is going to encounter resistance because this is not the way that the town is used to doing things. They're used to doing things one project at a time, and it's always a battle to get people to vote for it. This would change the argument from we can't afford it to what do we do first to help the island.
Are there things that people can do over the next few weeks leading up to the town meeting to drum up support for this? And obviously, if they want to drum up opposition to it as well. I've never gone to a town meeting because I'm not a full-time resident, so I don't quite know what it's like in there, but I can just imagine it's rather kind of a sense of disorganization that might come with it because there's so many things being bantered back and forth.
Well, I have to say that because the town has an excellent moderator who runs the meeting very well, it usually does not get out of hand, and everybody gets a chance to speak. And I think everybody should get a chance to speak.
Exactly.
This is about everybody's island, and the island we want to leave for our children and those that come after. It's our responsibility. So much land is in conservation. Now, if we can do something to protect the ponds and the harbor as well, then everything that makes Nantucket special will be preserved and protected. And then we can look at things like coastal resilience and how we're going to survive the rising seas.
So you've heard it from Howard Dickler. Howard's got a fantastic proposal on the table. It'll go before the annual town meeting. Every voter on the island will have a chance to make their voice heard and voting up or down on this tax override. A big thanks to Howard for joining us today on Cross Currents. We applaud him for his citizen-led initiative to really give a boost to our great little island. We encourage every Nantucket resident to come out on April 3rd for your voice and vote to be heard. This is Scott Widmeyer for Cross Currents on Nantucket's NPR station, WNCK. Email me at scott.widmeyer@gmail.com with comments or suggestions for future shows. Take care, and don't forget to show up at the town meeting on April 3rd.
Cross Currents with Scott Widmeyer on Nantucket's NPR station WNCK. Tune in again next time for insightful commentary on a wide range of topics that impact the lives of Nantucketers. Cross Currents with Scott Widmeyer.